All right, guys, so this is the lesson 12 video, right? I'm going to be going over a little bit of distribution, but the new stuff is going to be factoring. So distribution we've actually done before in Unit 1. Okay, so I'll be able to distribute, factor expressions, and then apply distributing and factoring to solve different kinds of problems. So for those of you that might not remember, whenever you're distributing, whatever number is attached to your parentheses, you're multiplying it to everything inside. Okay, so here I would have A times B and then A times C. It could also go backwards. You won't really see it like this too often. This is the way that you'll see it majority of the time. So here's an example, okay? I'm going to take this 2 and distribute it to everything inside. Okay, so I'd have 2 times 4 plus 2 times 3x. Now this is where it's a little bit different from last time because now we have variables, right? I have this x that's attached to it. The only way it changes this problem is that you just now have an x. You still solve this the same way you would before. So if I multiply 2 times 4, I get 8. And here you multiply your numbers and keep the variable, right? Your x is just going to go along for the ride. So I'd have 2 times 3, which is 6, and x. And then from lesson 11, right, these are not like terms, so I cannot add them together. I have an 8 here, and I have a 6x here, so I can't add them together. And then let's try this next one. Remember, the number that is outside of the parentheses is what gets multiplied to everything inside. Okay, so I have negative 5 times 2x plus, I have negative 5 times 7. Okay. Now if I have negative 5 times 2, it's negative 10x. Don't forget your x goes along for the ride. Plus, negative 5 times 7 is negative 35. Now this plus minus right here, this plus minus, I like to call it clutter. Okay? Anytime you have a plus and a negative sign like this, you got to clean it. Now if you think about when you're multiplying, if you have opposite signs, your answer is going to be negative. If you have the same sign, so if it's a minus minus, your answer is going to be positive. So when I clean up this clutter, this plus minus will turn into just a minus sign. Minus 35. There is a little bit of a shorthand way to see that. So this is kind of like the shortcut. Okay, so if you don't write this step right here, this first step that I did where I showed the multiplication, if you have negative 5 times 2, right, that's negative 10x, bring your x. If you have negative 5 times 7, that is negative 35, so negative 35. Remember when we were talking about combining like terms in lesson 11, the subtraction sign can also double as a negative. Okay, so subtraction is like negative and addition is like positive. All right, so let's practice. Sometimes you will have more than 2 terms inside of your parentheses, and that's 100% okay. This 4 is still going to be multiplied to everything inside. Okay, so if I have 4 times 5x plus 4 times 3y plus, oops, nope, not plus, that is a minus. Right, because there's a minus sign right here, so this would be minus 4 times 10. So 4 times 5 is 20, x, bring the variable along. 4 times 3 is 12, y, bring the variable along, minus 4 times 10 is 40. And that's all you can do, you're finished. Because I can't combine any of these, because even though both of these still have a variable, they are different variables. They are not the same, so I cannot combine them. Alrighty, this one over here. Now for this one, I am not going to be writing out this step right here. I'm just going to start multiplying it from here. Okay, now if I look at just this first set, right here I have 2 sets of distribution. I have this first one And I also have this second one over here. So I'm going to look just at this first one in red. Okay, negative 9 times 2 is negative 18x. Bring your variable along for the ride. And then I have a negative 9 and a minus 6. Okay, remember that the sign in front of the number, whether it's addition or subtraction, is attached to it forever. Okay, so this 6 has this minus sign or subtraction attached to it. So you treat it as if it is just a negative number. Okay, so if I have negative 9 times negative 6, that is positive 54. Okay, positive 54. We will do more examples like that, so you'll see that multiple times. Now over here, right, our second distribution, I have 3 times 5, which is 15, and it's positive, so I'm going to put a plus sign. And I have 3 times x. Remember, this x has a minus sign in front, so it is negative 3x. If you don't know this already, anytime there's just a lone variable like an x here, there's always an invisible 1 in front of it because 1 times anything is just x, right? If I were to have 2x, I would have x times x. If I have 1x here, I just have 1x, so that's why I can put a 1. Okay, now we're almost done with this one. Now what I have to do is, well, I can kind of combine some stuff here, right? I have like terms. I have this negative 18x and this negative 3x, right? Remember when you separate your terms, the sign in front of your number is always attached to it. And I also have these numbers I can add together. So guys, please remember that if you want to, you can use a calculator for these. So you could type in negative 18 minus 3 and you will get negative 21, and then just don't forget to bring your x. Okay, don't type in the x into the calculator, it won't work. But you can use a calculator. And then let's combine our numbers. I have 54 plus 15. That will give me 69. Right? And I can't combine anything else, so I'm done. So once you get the hang of these problems, they shouldn't take you too long. Okay, I honestly, if I were you guys, I would always use a calculator just to double check my sign. Make sure that you know how to type in a negative in a calculator. It is not the same as doing a subtraction sign. Okay, negatives are not the same. There should be a separate negative button. Let's try some more. So for these ones, I want to use a calculator because I'm dealing with decimals, right? So let me grab mine really quick. I have negative 8 times 1.2. So negative 8 times 1.2, I get negative 9.6x. Okay. Now I'm going to do the second one. I have negative 8 times 6.7. So negative 8 times 6.7, I get negative 53.6. And then I have this negative 8 times negative. Remember, this minus sign is attached to it. So negative 8 times negative 3.5. And when I do that, I get positive 28. Okay, now if I look here, I have some like terms I can combine, right? I have this minus 53.6 plus 28. So I'm going to type this into my calculator, negative 53.6 plus 28. So when I combine this negative 9.6x, I don't change anything there, but when I combine those, I get negative 25.6. And then I'm all finished. All right, let's do this last one here. Right? I'm distributing my 13 to everything. So let's do this first one. 13 times negative 6.4. Oops, I did something wrong here on my calculator. 13 times negative 6.4. I get negative 83.2x. Guys, don't forget to bring your variable along for the ride. Got to distribute the 13 to the next one. So 13 times 45, I get 585y. And all the way to the last one, 13 times 2, right? Negative 2. 13 times negative 2 gives me negative 26w. Right? And I'm already done. This one I'm actually done because since I have different variables attached to each of my numbers, they are not like terms. Remember, the variable has to be the same. And since these are different, I can't combine them. All right. So now, when you are distributing with fractions, there is a bit of a shortcut. Okay, so I'm going to show you the first way, I guess the original way first. Okay, then I will show you the shortcut way on this method. So if I'm distributing a fraction, I'm still multiplying this fraction to everything that's inside of my parentheses. Okay, so if I have 1/2 and I'm multiplying it by 2x, right, I need to put that 2x over 1. So when I multiply this straight across, 1 times 2x is 2x over 2 times 1 is 2. Now these 2's right here, they'll cancel, or if I divide 2 divided by 2, I get 1. Right, so this is equal to just x. For that second term, the 6 here, right, if I multiply it by 6 over 1, I get 6 over 2, which is 3. Right, 1 times 6 is 6, 2 times 1 is 2. I simplify that, I get 3. And then for this last one, I have 1/2 times negative 10 over 1. I get negative 10 over 2, which is negative 5. So if I write all of these next to each other, I have x plus 3 minus 5. I can combine these two, right? 3 minus 5 is negative 2. If you would like to, you can 100% type your fraction into a calculator and multiply it by this whole number. Okay, so if you don't want to do it this way, use your calculator because you can, right? Type in 1/2 times 2. Type in 1/2 times 6. 1/2 times negative 10. You'll get the same answers. Okay, now the shortcut way, this is how I do it. Okay, if you notice, what we did over here was I did the number inside my parentheses, this 2, I multiplied it by 1, which is the numerator, and then I ended up dividing it by 2, which is my denominator. Okay, so I did 2 times 1 divided by 2. So 2 times 1 is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. If I look at 6, I did 6 times 1, which is 6, divided by 2, which is 3. Negative 10 times 1 is negative 10, divided by 2 is negative 5. Okay, so what you could do if you can visualize it this way is any number that you have in here, you're just going to replace it with this 1, right? Because any number times 1 is itself. So essentially what you're doing here is you're just dividing every single one of these numbers by the number in your denominator. So since my denominator here is 1/3, I'm taking every single one of these numbers and dividing it by 3. Okay, so if I have 6 divided by 3, that is 2x. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 24 divided by 3 is 8. And then again, I can combine my like terms. So I would have 2x minus 4. Now, if what I did here was confusing or you don't understand why, then you can type in 1/3 into your calculator and multiply it by 6. You have to do the actual fraction. Do not change this to a decimal because 1/3 doesn't end. It goes on forever. So you have to use this as a fraction. I have 2 more examples, okay, that we're going to do. So remember, if I have 1/4, this is the same thing as me dividing everything in here by 4, okay, because it's like I would do 1 times 8 divided by 4. If I pulled this out, 1 over 4 times 8 over 1, right, I would have 8 over 4, which is just 2. So it's like I'm dividing all of my whole numbers inside my parentheses by 4, okay? So if I have 8 divided by 4, that is 2x. 24 divided by 4 is 6. and 16 divided by 4 is 4. Now again, I can combine my like terms right here. 6 minus 4 is 2. Alright, so I apologize if it's loud in the background, if you can hear that. For this second one here, I'm going to take all the numbers inside and I'm going to divide everything by 2, okay? Because since my denominator is 2, I'm dividing everything by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5x. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 30 divided by 2 is 15. I can combine my like terms. I get negative 23. Okay, remember, because this is minus minus. So it's like I have 8 negatives and 15 negatives, so I have to combine them. Again, type this into your calculator, negative 8 minus 15, and you will get negative 23. Okay, factoring. Factoring is probably one of the harder concepts when you're dealing with simplifying expressions. When you're factoring, you are taking out the greatest common factor. Okay, now what the greatest common factor is, if you were to look at this expression here, right, 4x and 6y, what you're looking at is what is the largest number that I can divide into both of those evenly, right? If I pull out, I can divide both of those by 1, but that doesn't change anything. I can divide both of those by 2, right? So if I were to take out a 2, I need to think to myself, 2 times what number will give me 4x? Well, 2 times 2 is 4, and I just have to bring my x. 2 times what number gives me 6? 3, and I just have to bring down my y. So I'm going to do a decent amount of these so you can see what it looks like. Okay, but the goal of it is pretty much just to pull out a factor, preferably the greatest one, and then figure out 2 times what gives me 4, or whatever number times this number will give me my original expression. Factoring is the opposite of distribution. So they undo each other. They're like the math inverse operations of each other. Okay, so remember, when you're factoring, you want to think, what is the largest number that I can divide everything by? Right? I have a 12x and an 18. Well, both of these are even, so I know I can do 2 right off the bat. Okay, so let's pull out a 2. So whenever you pull out a 2 and you're factoring, your 2 is now the number that's outside your parentheses when you're distributing. Okay, but now what we have to do is fill out what's inside the parentheses here. Okay, so if I have 2, 2 times what number gives me 12? 2 times what is 12? Well, I know 2 times 6 is 12, right? But there's an x, so I have to bring the x. There's a plus sign in between, so I'm going to bring my plus sign in between. Now I have 2 times what gives me 18, and 2 times 9 gives me 18. That's all you're doing. Okay. Here's another one, 32 and 48. Now these are both even, right? So I know I can pull a 2 out. However, I feel like there's a little bit of a bigger number that I can pull out of both of these, right? Try and think of a larger number that you can divide into both of these. I'll give you guys a few seconds. It's bigger than 2. So it should actually be 4. Okay. If I take out 4, I have to think 4 times what number gives me 32. Okay, so there's a few ways you can think about this. Right, if you are unsure, what you could always just do is, if I'm pulling out a 4 from here, I could just do 32 divided by 4. If you type in 32 divided by 4 into a calculator, you will get 8x. Okay, and then if I look at this 48 here, right, I have a minus sign here, so I want the minus sign there. If I look at this 48, well, if I'm not 100% sure, I could go, well, 48 divided by 4 is 12. Now guys, for these type of problems, there's multiple answers, because obviously here I pulled out a 4, right? But I could also pull out a 2, because this is even, right? So 2 times 16 is 32, and 2 times 24 is 48, right? So there's multiple answers. The good news is that on your exam and like checkpoints and stuff, it should be majority multiple choice, which means that you could either see this number, or sorry, this answer or this answer, and you just have to know that both of those work. Now for these answers, it's actually pretty cool because you can check your work easily. Okay, so how you check your work here is you just distribute. So if I were to take this 4 and multiply it to everything inside, right? 4 times 8 is 32x, and 4 times 12 is 48. So when you distribute back in, you should get the same expression that you started with, right? Which is why they're opposites, which is pretty cool. It's also nice because if you're not 100% sure how to factor, what you could do on your exam or like your checkpoints is just work backwards, which is pretty nice. Also, I have a few of those that we'll go over. Okay, so here's our next example, 2x minus 8, right? Well, both of these are even, so I know I can pull out a 2, right? Now, here's my issue. If I pull out a 2 here, what number do I put here? Because 2 and 2, right? I already have a 2. I could just put x. Or if you wanted to, you could put 1x, right? Because 2 times 1 will give me that 2. And then minus 4, right? Because 2 times 4 gives me 8. Now, if I wanted to check this, I can distribute everything back inside. So 2 times 1 is 2x, and 2 times 4 is 8. So since I get the same exact expression, that means we are right. Factoring out fractions. Okay, so the course also has you guys factor out fractions. It is not as complicated as you think. Okay, remember when we were distributing fractions, we divided everything, right? If I had something like 1/2 times 6x plus 10, I would take everything inside and divide it by 2, right? Well, since factoring is the opposite of, sorry, I'm going to write the answer. Right, I did 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Well, factoring is the opposite of distribution, which means instead of dividing, we're going to do the opposite of division, which is multiplying, right? So if I wanted to take 1/2 out of this expression, right, I wanted to take 1/2 out. What you do is just multiply your numbers here by the denominator, which is 2. So 5 times 2 is 10. Don't forget your x. 11 times 2 is 22. Now again, you can double check it if you wanted to, right, by distributing your 1/2. Remember, when you distribute a fraction, you're dividing what's your numbers inside by the denominator, which here is 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5x. 22 divided by 2 is 11. So again, we get the same thing. So here's another. For this one, let's factor out a 1/3. Okay. Now with fractions, it's kind of forgiving because you can really pick which fraction you want, right? If I wanted to pull out 1/2 here, I could and just multiply everything by 2. But let's try 1/3. Right, so since I'm pulling out a 1/3, I need to multiply all of my numbers here by 3. So 3 times 3 is 9x. 10 times 3 is 30y. Now since there is a minus sign in between these two terms, I'm going to keep my minus. 7 times 3, which is 21. And there's a plus sign here, which means I want to keep my plus sign. And there we have it. All right, so these are the questions that you guys have on your exam checkpoint and probably workbooks where you're selecting which expressions are equivalent to this given one. Okay, so here we're selecting 2. So when you are given these, guys, what I would do is honestly, I would just go in and multiply and distribute everything and see which answers give you this up here. Okay, so if I have 3 times negative 14, this is negative 42x, and 3 times 28 is 84. So A is one of them. Now, this is where you have to be careful with your signs. Okay, notice this was positive, negative, so I got a negative. Here, I have a negative and a negative, which means when I multiply these two, again, use your calculator. When you multiply two negatives together, you get positive 42x. Since I need a negative 42x, B is not one of them. Again, here I have a negative and a negative, which means I'm going to get a positive 42x again, so it can't be C. So let's double check this last one, right? Negative and positive gives me negative 42x. And I have a negative and a negative. Remember, the minus sign in front of the 6 means that you can treat it like it's a negative 6. So negative times negative is positive. So it should be A and D, at least for this example. So now it doesn't tell us how many we're picking, but it just says select all the expressions equivalent to this. So a really quick way of checking this, guys, is honestly just looking for the negatives, right? I need to have a negative 81 here. So if I have negative 3 and 27, that's negative 81. And again, I have negative 3 and a minus 9. Remember, the minus sign is attached, so you treat it like it's a negative number. So negative 3 times negative 9 is positive 27. So this works. Negative 9 times positive 9 is negative 81. Negative 9 times negative 3 is positive 27. Just a refresher on multiplication rules. If you have a minus and positive, or a positive and a negative number, you will get negative. If you have the same signs, meaning negative, negative, it's positive, or if you have plus, plus, you will also get positive. So it's a quick refresher. I would really try and learn these if you don't know them already. But you do have a calculator that you can use, so it's not the end of the world, but you should really start picking up on these patterns. So here I have negative, negative. That means I'm going to get positive, so it can't be C. Same thing here, negative, negative, so I'm going to get positive, can't be D. I have 3 times negative 27, so that's negative 81x, and 3 times 9, which is 27. So here I got A, B, and E. Okay, which of the following equations has the following equation has an error? Which answer could correct the error? Okay, so for these ones, honestly, guys, obviously you know this is wrong, right? It does not give us this 5x minus 17 when you combine everything. So what I would do is I would just look through your answers and start plugging in the differences and see what you get, right? If I change this first part here to this 1/2 times 2x minus 6, right? So change this plus sign to minus instead of the plus. Well, let's see what happens. Right, remember when I'm distributing a fraction, I'm just dividing all of my numbers by the denominator. Okay, so I have 2 divided by 2, which is just 1, right, 1x. 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Okay, now over here I'm distributing, right, so I have 4 times x, which is 4x, 4 times 5, which is 20. So if I combine these, I have 1 and 4x, which is 5x. And I have negative 3 and 20. Now, negative 3 plus 20, the 20 is bigger, which means this is a plus 17. So close, we have the right numbers, but it's still not quite right. So let's try the second one, right? So let's change this x plus 5 to x minus 5. So I'm going to rewrite my expression. Remember, this 2x originally is plus 6. 4 times x minus 5. Okay, let's check it. So if I have 1/2, remember whenever you're distributing a fraction, you're dividing, right? So this would be x plus 3. Now let's distribute over here. So I have 4x minus 20. So if I have x plus 4x, that gives me 5x, and 3 minus 20 is negative 17. So that means that B works. There's really no easier way to do this other than just kind of guessing and checking, and well, not guessing and checking, but plugging in the different changes to the expression and then trying to solve it and see if it works. unless you know something I don't. And if you know a different way to solve these, then let me know because I'd love to share it with everyone else. But that's how I would go through and solve it. Okay, so those are all the examples I have for you guys. If you need more help with any of this stuff, please let me know. I'd love to have a one-on-one and we can go over some stuff. And if you get stuck on a checkpoint or anything like that, again, please let me know. Okay, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.